I'm keeping my handkerchief out because I don't think I'm finished crying.
I did ask you if you had one before coming in.
Yes, you did. And I didn't understand the question, so I wiped my nose. Thank you. I think this is really a gift. I don't know about you all, but I've only heard about that process. I've never heard of anybody reporting about it or people talking about having it in their family. And it feels to me like something we should all do in a sense, because, you know, people with terribly debilitating disease suffer and suffer and suffer, and we go, oh, this is so horrible, that took so long before they died. Other people have a heart attack and they're gone instantly, and we say, that's the way to go. But we never say, let's take the time to talk about it, to talk about all those things. And you all had weeks with your dad.
I mean, I think the gift, we've been told the film is a gift, and it's a beautiful word. It was a gift to us to find and discover this law. We didn't know there was such a law when Dad asked to die. He was pleading with us, and he was the most tenacious person any of us ever knew, and so positive that we actually had no idea he was even carrying the shame you just witnessed him unburden himself of in the Vidui. We knew that he was troubled that he couldn't provide for us financially. We had no idea it was that deep, and that he was holding it and he was gripping that hard to it. And so he suddenly was pleading to die, and it was really because he was going to go to a facility, and he couldn't walk again, and he qualified because he was terminally ill, but he had the kind of terminal illness that could have gone on for a while. But he said to me, would you rather get the call in the middle of the night, or would you rather know when? And it did feel like we were walking a plank. I have to say it was terrifying, but it was also allowed us so much of an opportunity to surround him with love, to have closure ourselves, to get him to realize that he'd given us everything. That was, unthinkable to me, that he would leave the earth feeling like a failure. And so when he says Biden won and so did I, it was just a great moment for all of us children to feel like, oh my gosh, he understands. He understands that he did great. And that without those weeks, we wouldn't have had that opportunity. We were able to really produce the end of his life. We even had a celebration of life the day before he died. And the grandchildren being around his bed was another just beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So many people, our society, we're so scared of death. And we
never talk about it.
We never talk about it. And we also try to shield our children from it,
Exactly.
And the way that young people have responded to this is really something. Because they're
It's
losing their
really
grandparents, and they don't know how to deal with it, and this gives them a way, and it should hopefully, inspire people to invite the children into the room, not afterwards, but before the loved one,
right.
dies. And hopefully
today, start talking about it today.
You can.
You're all very much alive. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about.
My mom, who watches the film nightly, literally nightly, if not multiple times a day, for the first year after he died. And she was just waiting to follow him. She said she was in a lot of denial in that period, and she really couldn't. And I don't know how you can really grasp losing your partner of 54 years and someone who is as unconditionally loving and kind as my father. But she had a really hard time, and the film really buoyed her through the grieving process. And she has said to audiences, she does Q&As quite a lot, and she has said, film your loved ones now. I really recommend it. She tells everybody that.
So as a filmmaker, I could see how you decided that you wanted to document it, to be there with him in somehow. But once you started, was there ever a tension between the director and the daughter about the filming itself?
It's a great question. So I for those of you who weren't here for the intro, are there anybody who didn't hear me say what I said in the beginning? Okay, good. So I won't repeat myself. So I didn't think it was right to set up cameras, but once I did, Dad invited me to do it. And Mom seemed to be comforted that there would be something left of Dad when he was gone. And what was incredible was that after 30 years of making films, I was just like, I know how to film life unfolding. I mean, one of my dig was 2,500 hours of footage over 7 years. You know, We Live in Public was 10,000 hours. I'm sorry, 5,000 hours over 10 years. But a lot of these films were just a lot of observational filmmaking. And so I thought, I can do this unobtrusively, even for myself. This cannot be the main event. Like, I want to make sure that we have Dad's personality and his voice preserved, but I don't want to think about filmmaking. So I set the cameras up, and when people would visit, I would go operate the cameras. And it was great because the main camera that had the lav mic on Dad and on whoever was visiting Dad was in the other room and was shooting through an open door. So the people who were having this private moment with Dad couldn't see the camera, and I wasn't invading their space. And yet, as Dad got closer and closer to death, my siblings, I'd find them behind the camera listening to their own children and filming their own children with Dad.
So that's why the camera moved sometimes?
Well, the camera moved because I would operate and I would move the cameras.
But there were times
one
where
main camera was the one that was
Right.
constantly, like the one that was filming me and Dad on March, when I realized it's March 1st and I realize he's going to be gone in 2 days and I have a breakdown. That camera from that angle was always in the other room, and you could hear the sound.
And you never had production assistant, sound person?
I mean,
other-
I had a young story producer named Jenny Hochberg who, pulled footage in the post process, and I'd find her crying in front of the Avid, bless her. And there was about 500 hours of footage, and I made the film incredibly fast. It was like this;
Yes.
It came flying out of me. It was just unbelievable. It's like I instinctively to do. I really felt like Dad was right there with me in the process, actually.
And the
but she
times-
would help with like changing batteries and stuff like that. And then Morgan, my wife, who scored the film, pretty great score. And
Beautiful.
without the film wouldn't be here without the score, which the fact that she was there in the room and was supporting me as a partner, gave the score a dimension that most composers don't really have that opportunity to be in the subject matter, involved in the subject matter. And so she worked beautifully to create like a womb-like sonic environment. But I wanted her to have the audience feel held through the movie and to kind of mirror the beautiful and sacred space that was Dad's living room. Because Dad really set the tone, and Dad comforted everybody who walked in there, even though he was the one dying.
That was amazing that he seemed to be taking care of all of you
Yeah.
as much as you were caring for him.
Yeah.
He was there for you, basically saying, it's okay.
I think he even had me film because he knew that it would help me. I mean, it gave me a mission. It gave me something to feel like I can contribute this to the family. That's what it was intended to do. And it was like a safety blanket for me. So it was really like filmmaking was there for me like an old friend or something. It was like as soon as I set the cameras up, I was able to be fully present as his daughter. So there was not, to answer your question, this battle between filmmaker and daughter. In fact, the fact that I was a filmmaker allowed me to because I couldn't remember Dad. Oh, this is what I want to say. I couldn't remember Dad from before the stroke. So I was 9.5 when Dad had that stroke, and he was my best friend and my absolute hero, and we would run together. We would play tennis together. I know that, and I've seen photos, but I can't remember him able-bodied. And so that's why I really panicked about forgetting him now. I was like, I cannot forget him. So as soon as those cameras were set up, I was able to really calm down. And I set one Nest camera up, and that you see that in the scene with Gigi. That was like the only camera that was still running that night. And I did that because I knew that we were all in shock, and I knew that I didn't want to do the typical filmmaking process of having to label cards or anything. So I was just like, I'll keep a surveillance camera going, and that way I'll know what time of day and what happened first, second, and third. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
As filmmakers, we're always concerned with angles. Here's a wide shot. Now I need a medium shot. Now I need a close-up. Now I need to move the camera over there. Because if I was to film all of us here with one camera in a wide shot that took you all in and had everybody say something, for instance, we'd all fall asleep in 5 minutes because film has to be dynamic. We have to work at it. But we never got that sense that there were just two cameras there that were just doing what those two cameras did. It felt like you were moving around. It felt like you went in for close-ups. It felt like there were other things. And so the way you set it up worked beautifully.
Well, thank you, but I feel like Errol Morrison admitting that I had more like 4 cameras. I like cameras, and it was really interesting because I was able to. The only day that I recruited help was from a DP friend of mine who filmed my film about the opioid epidemic, Coming Clean. And I really thought he had a very sensitive nature with a lot of people going through a lot of hard things in that film. And so I asked him, his name's Turner Jumonville, and I said, would you come and meet would you consider filming the death of my father? And so he came and met Mom and Dad a few days before Dad died. And so I should say that I did not operate camera that morning, as you could tell. Yeah. But yeah, it was more about the idea as I really went from daughter to filmmaker. It was in the editing process, and I saw everyone coming in with the biggest questions about life and death, and I saw Dad making jokes, petting their hands, telling them how much he helped. They helped him,
caring for them,
and they left changed. Like, they were terrified of facing mortality, and they left there comforted. And I thought, this is really phenomenal. And then my brother going through this process of coming back in touch with his emotions, and my sister balancing daughter and rabbi, and my dad himself peeling back the layers in the editing. What I tried to do was really get you to understand, like, sort of at first him to be this disembodied voice, helpless and isolated, as so many of our loved ones were during COVID in a hospital, and then he's this elderly, helpless man in a wheelchair. And it's just not until he tells us what he wants to do to Donald Trump that you really get a sense of, like, okay, this guy's going to be quite the leading man to follow now, And I was also trying to have you fall in love with Dad. Like, he's my favorite person. So I want, now the magic and power of film is that he lives in your heart, and
absolutely.
And as the days count down, you're more and more invested because you're in the family, you're in the room.
I feel lucky to have known him.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the idea of the film, is that it really is just an intimate look. And what I think is really miraculous about film is that in the intimacy and the details is where you can see your own loved ones and you really have your own experience. If it's unmediated by narration and that kind of thing, which it takes a specific kind of subject matter. I mean, I do have narration in some of my films, but it takes a very specific sort of, I think, special circumstance to really be able to avoid it. And in this case, I was able to do that. So,
great.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? I think we have a microphone someplace if anybody would like to say anything. They are right there.
Oh, Ondi, it was such a beautiful, beautiful film. And I found myself examining my own life and what I hope to leave with my own children and other people. And I never thought about the process before. So you gave the audience and all of us such a beautiful sort of way to follow our own lives. I would love to have your sister as my spiritual advisor. I thought she was
highly
so
recommend.
Wonderful for all of you, and additionally her father, and letting him into the whole process. Now, what are you hoping that this film will do for other people as it's shown around the country? And also, are you looking for it to be political in terms of getting laws changed in other states, or what do you hope for?
That's what I hope for. I didn't make it for that reason, but I made it because I hope it touches everyone and allows everyone an opportunity to do exactly, to sort of play out their own lives, and also how they want to let their loved ones go, how they themselves want to go. I just thought it was too important not to share, and that it would go against everything I've spent my life doing as a professional filmmaker, documentarian, to not share it. That was the hard thing. And my sister, who is, 100% behind this film, was absolutely resistant to it coming out. She really, really didn't want it to see the light of day. And of course, what do? I called Mom, and Mom told her, look, I look at this film every day. It's kept me alive, And then so she shared it with clergy and friends who came around. And Rachel is such an activist that she's really, I think she's going to lead the charge, because when she first was against it, she said, look, it's beautiful, but it's private. It's sacred and private. And I want to stay that way. And then she started to realize how important it was that we allow that it's only a right in 10 states. It's not a right in the state of New York, for example, and you can't go to New Jersey and have it. You have to establish residence there. Yeah. So this is very, very important for a lot of people who are suffering and their families, very important. It's a basic human right. I didn't think about it before, but who should stand between you and your body when you're terminally ill and suffering? And as my sister, sorry if you saw The Daily Show, because I'm going to repeat myself, but I think it's a very interesting comment that my sister has made now in Q&As, which is that since this came out, and another thing was that she's a rabbi, and it was against Jewish law. It was a violation of Jewish law and of most religious law to take your own life in any way, because it disparages life. But they've reversed their decision. Reform Judaism has, since this film, reversed their decision because, and their argument is, it's a very well-written, very, very in-depth argument. And the argument is a law without tenderness is wickedness. And that when the rabbis actually wrote the law millennia ago, the average time of suffering was maybe 5 days. And now it's, thanks to modern medicine, years, years of a person sitting there, lying there in pain. And there comes a time when it's just time to go, and it's not scary for them. In fact, Dad it's almost like the veil lifted, and he could see his family again. And I flash back so you can see that 6 months prior he thought there'd be nothing. He was an atheist, basically, So it was really interesting to see him become more comfortable with the transition. And so yes, I hope that there's an organization called Compassion and Choices, which is sort of like the Planned Parenthood of this basic human right. And so they have the law in front of 22 state legislatures right now. And they say this is the most powerful.
To watch it.
That we've shown it to the New York State Legislature. My sister and I did a Q&A virtually during in May. But we really hope that, and that piece that we just did on The Daily Show was reaching, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and it was all about the right to die. I just went super political with it. So I guess, I really want this to help people, because we couldn't take Dad's suffering away for 40 years. But if this can help people.
Well, thank you very much for making it, and thank you for showing it to us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you.